Welcome to Aral Kasaysayan, where we uncover the stories, struggles, and triumphs that shaped the Philippines. The First Filipinos, Austronesian Migrations Part 1, The Dawn of the Austronesians. Long before the name Philippines was ever spoken, before kingdoms and heroes, before the first Spanish sails appeared on the horizon, there were people who dared to dance with the sea. They lived not on one island, but on thousands scattered across the vast blue waters of the Pacific and Indian Oceans. They were called the Austronesians, the ocean voyagers, the first to tame the waves, and the ancestors of those we now call the first Filipinos. The story of the Austronesians begins not in the islands we know today, but far to the north, in the lush valleys and coastal plains of Taiwan, around 5,000 years ago. There, ancient communities thrived, farmers, potters, and fishermen who looked toward the sea not as a barrier, but as a road waiting to be explored. They were skilled in cultivating rice and taro, in shaping polished stones into tools, and in crafting canoes that could glide like spirits over the water. No one knows what pushed them to leave the comfort of their homeland. Some say it was hunger, the call of the sea promising new lands and better harvests. Others say it was curiosity, a whisper from the horizon that said, "There is more beyond." Whatever it was, it sparked one of the greatest human migrations in history, a movement that would shape half the world's islands and give rise to countless languages, cultures, and peoples. As centuries passed, waves of Austronesian voyagers set out on their canoes of Balangay, bangka, or prahu, guided only by the stars and the rhythm of the waves. They carried with them seeds, animals, and memories of home. They sailed southward, toward the chain of islands that we now call the Philippines. When they arrived, they found a land bursting with life, forests thick as walls, rivers that sparkled under the sun, and coastlines that seemed endless. They settled, adapted, and multiplied. These were the ancestors of the first Filipinos, long before any colonizer or foreign trader set foot on these shores. But this story is not only legend. Modern science, archaeology, and linguistics have begun to uncover the truth behind this ancient migration. Researchers found that the languages spoken from Madagascar to Hawaii, and from Easter Island to the Philippines, belong to one great linguistic family, Austronesian. This vast web of languages, all sharing similar roots, reveals a story written not in books but in words passed from generation to generation. In the Philippines, we still hear these echoes. Words like mata for eye, too big for water, beta for stone, and anak for child, they exist not only here, but also in Malaysia, Indonesia, and even Polynesia. Every word is a fossil, a remnant of an ancient tongue carried by voyagers across the sea. According to the out-of-Taiwan theory, these early seafarers began their journey around 3000 BC, then migrated from Taiwan southward, following the coasts of Luzon, then spreading through the Visayas and Mindanao, and onward into Indonesia, Melanesia, and the farthest reaches of the Pacific. Archaeological finds, such as the red-slipped pottery and jade artifacts, show remarkable similarities between those found in Taiwan and those unearthed in northern Luzon, silent evidence of the ancient connection. Yet, as every great story has its mysteries, so too does this one. Not all scholars agree on where the Austronesians truly began. Some argue that before they ever reached Taiwan, their ancestors may have already lived somewhere in island Southeast Asia, in places like Borneo or the Philippines themselves. This theory is known as the Nusantao Maritime Trading and Communication Network, proposed by the Filipino anthropologist Wilhelm Solheim II. He believed that rather than one massive migration from the north, there was instead a long process of trade, travel, and interconnection among island peoples, an exchange that slowly gave rise to shared culture and language. Whichever theory is true, one thing is certain: the Philippines stood at the crossroads of the Austronesian world. Here, ancient sailors met, traded, married, and built communities that blended northern and southern traditions, creating a unique island identity that would endure for thousands of years. The early Austronesians were not primitive wanderers, they were master navigators and innovators. They built outrigger canoes that could cut through waves with grace and stability, a design so effective that it is still used today by Filipino fishermen. Their boats were not random creations but reflections of their deep understanding of nature. They read the stars, the winds, and the color of the sea. They knew how to tell direction by feeling the motion of the waves beneath their boats, and how to predict land by watching the flight of birds or the drift of seaweed. Long before the compass, long before maps, They had already mastered the art of navigation. To sail across open waters with no instruments, that was their genius. It was a knowledge passed from father to son, from elder to apprentice, a sacred heritage bound to the soul of the ocean. As the Austronesians spread, they brought not only technology but also identity, a way of seeing the world. Their lives were shaped by the sea, but rooted in the land. They planted rice on terraces carved into mountainsides, raised pigs and chickens, and built villages near rivers and coasts. They were farmers, fishers, weavers, and potters, artists of survival. In time, their small communities grew into complex societies. Trade networks flourished, linking island to island, coast to coast. From the shells of Sulu to the obsidian of Batanes, from the jade of Taiwan to the ceramics of Mindoro, goods and ideas flowed freely across the seas. The early Filipinos were part of this living web, connected not by borders but by boats, by stories, by kinship. Archaeologists have unearthed jade ornaments in the Philippines, crafted from a rare green stone called linglingno, traced all the way back to Taiwan. This jade was not only a symbol of beauty but of shared culture, proof that the peoples of the northern islands and the early Filipinos were bound by trade and tradition. In ancient graves, these ornaments were found near the chest or neck, suggesting they were worn as symbols of status, faith, or protection during life and death alike. But what kind of people were they, these early Austronesian Filipinos? They were storytellers. They spoke of the sun and the moon as lovers, of the sea as a mother who grants life and takes it back. They believed that spirits lived in the wind, in the trees, in the mountains. They honored their ancestors, believing that those who came before continued to guide the living. In every island, in every language, echoes of these beliefs remain, in our anido, our bayanihan, our deep respect for nature and kin. We are, in many ways, still children of the Austronesians, islanders bound by the memory of the sea. The Austronesians' journey was not easy. Their canoes faced storms that could swallow them whole, winds that could drive them off course for days. But they endured. For every storm, they had faith. For every wave, they had courage. And for every journey, they carried a piece of home, songs, seeds, and stories that would take root in new lands. By around 1500 BC, the Austronesians had reached nearly every island in the Philippine archipelago. They built homes of bamboo and thatch, raised families, and named the lands they settled Luzon, Visayas, Mindanao. From these roots, future generations would rise, the ancestors of the Tagalogs, Ilocanos, Visayans, and many others. Their legacy lived in the language we speak, the boats we build, and the way we look to the sea not with fear but with familiarity. Because for them, and for us, the sea was never something to escape, it was where life began. Part 2, the expansion and cultural blossoming. Centuries passed, and the Austronesian settlers flourished across the islands. Each community adapted to its landscape, some to the mountains, others to the coasts and rivers. Over time, their descendants began to look less like migrants and more like people of the land itself, children of the soil and sea. They built homes of bamboo and nipa, light enough to sway with the wind but strong enough to stand against storms. They farmed rice in valleys and along riverbanks, invented fish traps in mangrove creeks, and raised root crops in the highlands. Everywhere they went, they learned from nature, adjusting, innovating, and creating harmony with the environment around them. In these scattered islands, there was no single kingdom or empire, only small communities called barangays, named after the Balangay, the very boats that brought their ancestors here. Each barangay was a world of its own, ruled by a leader called a datu or raja, who guided the people not with iron, but with wisdom and kinship. The people shared labor and harvest, celebrated life and death through rituals, and told stories under the glow of firelight, stories of how the first ancestors came from the sea, guided by the stars. It was through these stories that they remembered who they were and where they came from. Even then, they were not isolated. The Austronesian world stretched far beyond the Philippines. Their cousins sailed across the Pacific, reaching the far islands of Polynesia, Hawaii, Samoa, and even Easter Island. Others voyaged west, across the Indian Ocean, and reached Madagascar off the coast of Africa. The same blood that flowed in the veins of the early Filipinos also flowed in the people of distant lands thousands of miles away. Modern genetic research confirms this deep connection. Studies show that Filipinos share ancient DNA markers with Polynesians, Malays, and Indonesians, living proof of one of humanity's greatest migrations. It is as if the ocean itself remembers, and while their genes spread, so did their ideas. The Austronesians were early masters of maritime trade. Even before the Chinese or the Arabs began to write about the islands, these early Filipinos already traded with their neighbors, exchanging shells for obsidian, ceramics for pearls, and stories for stories. The ocean was not a divider, but a bridge, a highway of exchange. Archaeological sites such as Nagsabaran in Cagayan and Palawan's Taban caves hold fragments of their lives, pottery shards, ornaments, and tools carved from bone and stone. Each piece, though silent, speaks volumes. They tell of communities that knew art, craftsmanship, and a sense of beauty. One of the most remarkable of these artifacts is the Manunggul Jar, discovered in Palawan, a burial jar from around 890 to 710 BCE. Its lid is shaped like a small boat carrying two human figures, one rowing, the other seated, perhaps the soul of the dead being ferried to the afterlife. It is both beautiful and profound, a symbol that even in death, the Austronesian spirit journeys onward, forever sailing toward the horizon. In the Manunggul Jar, we see more than art, we see belief. The belief that life and death are connected, that the journey does not end with the last breath. For these ancient Filipinos, death was not a fall into darkness, but a voyage, the final crossing of the eternal sea. Their beliefs tied them closely to the natural world. They worshipped the sun, the moon, the wind, and the sea. Every mountain had a spirit, every tree a soul, every river a guardian. This worldview, where humans are but part of nature's circle, shaped their respect for life and for the world around them. The Austronesians also left their mark on the land through language, the living thread that connects past to present. Over time, their original tongue branched into hundreds of dialects: Tagalog, Cebuano, Ilocano, Bicolano, Waray, and more, each distinct yet bound by shared roots. Even across the Pacific, in faraway Polynesia, many of the same words endure. Mata for eye, Lima for hand, Pito for seven, Beta for stone. These shared words are ancient footprints across the ocean, linguistic fossils proving that once, all these island peoples spoke as one. Through thousands of years, this shared Austronesian identity evolved. Some became mountain dwellers, others seafarers. Some grew to master rice cultivation, while others hunted, gathered, and traded. Their technologies advanced, they forged metal tools, built larger houses, and created ornaments of shell, bronze, and gold. In places like Butuan, archaeologists discovered ancient Balangay boats, preserved under the mud of the Agusan River. These boats, dating back to the 10th century, are physical reminders of a time when Filipinos were already skilled shipbuilders and sailors. The craftsmanship of the Balangay reveals knowledge of design, symmetry, and engineering that rivaled the best of their age. They were not mere islanders, they were navigators, traders, and builders of civilization. Each plank of the Balangay was fastened by wooden pegs and fiber lashings, not nails, an innovation that allowed the boats to flex with the waves rather than break against them. These vessels carried goods, ideas, and people from one island to another, spreading not just trade but kinship. The word barangay still carries that legacy, the community that travels and lives together. As trade flourished, ideas flowed freely. They learned to work metals, forging tools and ornaments from bronze and later, iron. This ushered in a new age, the Metal Age, a period of great advancement. They made weapons and jewelry, but more importantly, they made tools that transformed how they lived. Iron plows tilled more land. Bronze ornaments adorned their leaders. The Austronesian Filipinos were stepping into a new chapter, one that would prepare them for contact with the great civilizations beyond the sea. Part 3: Legacy and the Birth of Identity. By the dawn of the first millennium, the Austronesian world had become a vast network of islands and cultures, from the coasts of Asia to the heart of the Pacific. The Philippines, lying at the center of this network, thrived as a crossroads of exchange. Traders came and went, from China, from Borneo, from the Malay Peninsula. They brought silk, beads, and metal. They took back pearls, wax, and gold. The islands were alive with movement, color, and sound. But beneath the trade and the contact, the heart of the people remained Austronesian, islanders whose ancestors once chased the horizon. Their beliefs, their kinship systems, their deep respect for the sea, all these came from that ancient heritage. When foreign cultures arrived, Hindu, Buddhist, Islamic, and later Western, the Austronesian foundation absorbed them, reshaped them, and made them its own. This is why Filipino culture today feels layered yet united, because beneath every borrowed word, custom, or faith lies the same spirit that once guided the first canoes from Taiwan to Mindanao. Archaeologists and anthropologists continue to uncover clues about this enduring past. In the highlands of Ifugao, the rice terraces carved into the mountains stand as testaments to the ancient mastery of agriculture, terraces so grand they have outlasted kingdoms. In coastal Mindoro and Palawan, shell jewelry and pottery fragments whisper stories of trade routes long forgotten. Even the faces of Filipinos today, diverse yet familiar, carry the echoes of countless voyages and mingling of peoples. Modern genetics paints a story both vast and intimate. Through DNA analysis, scientists have found that the Filipino gene pool carries threads from both northern and southern migrations, from Taiwan's early farmers to the older island populations of Southeast Asia. We are, quite literally, the children of many journeys. And yet, in all that complexity, the essence remains simple: we are people of the sea. Our ancestors did not fear the ocean, they embraced it. They saw it not as something to divide, but as something that connected, a bridge between hearts, lands, and generations. When we look at the blue expanse of the Pacific, we are seeing the same horizon our ancestors once followed. When we hear the crash of waves, it is the same rhythm that once beat against the hulls of their canoes. Their courage lives in us, their stories breathe in our blood. The Austronesians taught the world the meaning of connection. Before the Silk Road crossed Asia, there was already a sea road, the Austronesian world, linking distant islands into one cultural ocean. Through this ancient network flowed not just goods but humanity itself, language, art, music, and belief. And though millennia have passed, their legacy endures in our traditions. In the way we celebrate Bayanihan, we echo their communal spirit. In our love for the sea, in our songs of longing, in our respect for nature, all are threads from the same woven story. Even our myths, passed down in whispers and songs, carry the memory of that migration. Stories of gods who came from the sky, of ancestors who crossed the waters, of heroes who journeyed beyond the horizon, these are not just tales. They are echoes of real journeys long ago. The first Filipinos were not simply settlers. They were dreamers, explorers who trusted the sea, who listened to the stars, who believed that every wave carried them closer to destiny. They built a civilization not on walls or weapons, but on connection to each other, to the land, and to the sea. So when we ask, who were the first Filipinos, we must remember this. They were the Austronesians, the voyagers, the navigators, the storytellers. They were the ones who crossed the unknown, who carried the light of home across the dark waves. Their blood still flows in ours. Their courage still speaks in our language. Their journey never ended, it continues in us. Every Filipino alive today carries within them that same spirit of movement and discovery. Every island, every dialect, every song is a ripple from that first great voyage. And though time has changed the faces and names, the heart remains unchanged, a heart that beats with the rhythm of the waves, a heart that still hears the call of the sea. We are, and have always been, the children of the Austronesians. We are the ocean's people. And our story, the story of the first Filipinos, is not just history. It is a legend that still lives, in every tide that touches our shores.